All right, can everyone hear me? If you can hear me, just put your finger on your nose. Good, good, good. Let me check this is working. Great. All right, let's kick this off with a question. All right, how many people think it's harder than ever before to be in L&D? Wow, man. See, I've got an optimistic crowd here. Let me ask the opposite question. Who thinks it's the best time to be in L&D right now? All right, most of you just sitting on the fence, don't really care, or just needed a seat. Well, look, I'm actually about to tell you, it's a pretty hard time to be in L&D. And the data shows that, and that's what we're going to talk about. But there is a way out to improve things. And what we're going to look at is, what is it that we need to change in order to make things better? Before that, let me quickly tell you who I am. My name is Nelson. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO at How Now. We're an AI learning company. We're right in the middle. We're the networking lounges. You can come and hear all about us. I'm also the author of Learning at Speed. How many people read the book? Anyone? Oh, we've got a few people read the book. Great. And so it's all about mental models and frameworks for how you can increase the speed at which your organization learns. And I'm also the host of a podcast series called L&D Disrupt. Anyone heard that? Oh, all right. Put it on for your journey back. We bring in some really interesting people and pick their brain around some of the biggest challenges facing work and people, and see if they've got any ideas or solutions. Now, that's enough about me. Let's go to this. This baby-faced young man is surprisingly me almost 10 years ago with a lot more black hair at that time. Now, not only is this about a decade ago, but this is also what I call the pre-product market fit era. How many people are familiar with this idea of product market fit? Oh yeah, a couple of people. Let me tell you what it is. Product market fit is, let's say we're all here about to start a business and we've got an idea for a product. How do you know whether people actually need your product and want your product? Now, that moment where you've built a product that the market wants, the customer wants, and people want, is what they call product market fit. And quite often, the first few years of your journey when you're starting out in a business is trying to find product market fit. And this was us pre-product market fit. You got an idea and you're trying things, and I like to say we took the long scenic route of trying a bunch of things out. And every time you get a bit of feedback around what's working, what's not working, and you tinker until you get to a point, and then you feel product market fit. Now, any of you go away and Google what product market fit is, you'll see some of the most abstract definitions of this. It's like asking someone to explain, how do you know that moment when you fell in love, right? It's as abstract as that. There's no clear definition, but you just know. And I used to hear that and go, that's a load of rubbish. Surely someone's got to be able to explain this, but you do know. It's that moment where people are buying faster than you could build what you're building and you can get it out to people. You're getting such great feedback that people are passing on the thing that you've built to other people and referring. Now, why am I talking about product market fit? Is once I started working with L&D and people teams, I started to see a similarity. And that's where, in my book, I talk about this idea of learning challenge fit. Now, what learning challenge fit is really what we're all trying to do is there is a business challenge that we need to solve, and we're trying to see whether we can develop and design the learning that's going to help us solve that business challenge. Now, until the moment you feel that learning challenge fit, actually all we're doing is every time we don't get the fit, we're wasting time, money, and resources. And we're also, it's bad for our reputation because people start thinking you're pushing out a lot of learning that's neither solving a business challenge or an individual challenge. And so actually what came apparent is much like how an early stage founder might be starting to find product market fit. In L&D, what we're really trying to do is find learning challenge fit with everything we're doing. And in trying to pursue learning challenge fit, you iterate until you get there. That's what the goal is. The goal is until the moment we can design learning that is demonstrating it's solving that business challenge, you keep iterating. Now, how do you do this? Now, from working with many organizations and L&D teams, in my book I talk about the learning flywheel. Now, what you have in the learning flywheel is essentially two loops that are connected to one another. On the right here, you've got the loop, which is the learning experience loop. This is the loop that typically someone who's learning will go through. Then on the other side, you've got the learning experience design loop. So that's typically the loop that someone in L&D or someone designing that learning experience will go through. So let's go through this together. So what you've got here is, let's assume you've got to start somewhere in the loop. And so when we get to learn, it's essentially you've put out some form of a learning resource. Let's simplify this. We've all probably pushed out a course at some point in our life. So let's say it's a course. So that's what the learn part is. Now after that, that's almost like I've shown them a video of how to ride a bike. Practice is when, ideally, I've given them a bike and say, get on this bike and practice how to ride it. Now, unfortunately, what I find is quite often we don't design for practice. That has its own issues because we're never testing. Yes, we know people know stuff, but we don't know whether they can actually do the thing. And once you get practice, that generates feedback. Now, this is where it gets interesting because that feedback is two types of feedback. One is feedback for the learner, because when they do the practice and they apply the skill or apply the knowledge, we can see them applying it so we can give them feedback, right? We can tell you did this well, you could have done this better. But it's also feedback for you as the learning experience designer, because it's giving you insight that actually that's not helped them get better at this job, right? So it gives you feedback on maybe I need to do something about this learning experience. Maybe they're not finding it. Maybe it's not covering the right stuff. Maybe it's not actually helping them develop the skill. So the feedback is two-pronged. It's feedback around for the learner and it's feedback for the experience designer. Now that goes into two ways, where if someone has built the skill, they're now sharing it. They become one of those SMEs who's going to pass this on to everyone else in the rest of the organization. But if it hasn't, then that comes back to you as a learning experience designer. You take that feedback, you will then go back to your team, the business partners you're working with, you'd ideate on what do we need to change here, and then you'll build that experience out, and then you put it back out to the learner to test. And then the loop starts again. Now, here what you're seeing is, to start the flywheel, it's hard, right? Because you're going from 0 to 1. But the reason why I called it a flywheel is what evidence shows is the more you go through the loop and the more data you collect in your feedback, the faster you now start to turn this flywheel, right? And the faster you get to learning challenge fit. Because you're constantly looking at the feedback to go, am I getting closer to improving that performance to solve that business challenge or not? Now here's the reality. Anyone who's read the book and applied it, or anyone who's sitting there and looking at this now going, that seems like hard work. And like I said, to turn that flywheel initially, it is. Because right now, in the current way people are approaching this, it requires a lot of manual effort. You need to gather the feedback. You need to think about how you're going to design these experiences, which all takes a lot of effort. And so quite often what we see is people who don't manage to get through the loops, and even the ones who do struggle to sustain it at scale, right? To do this for every team and every part of the organization and every challenge. Now this is where I'm about to tell you what is really exciting is AI is able to help us run through both of these loops and through the flywheel at speed and at scale with very little effort from humans. Now let me show you what that looks like. Where until now we had these limitations around what we can do to scale the flywheel, now we can do it at scale. Now it's no good me telling you can do it. I thought let me show you how organizations are using AI to do this today. So this is Guru. This is an AI agent that we built at How Now, which essentially is to run this flywheel at scale for every single person within your organization. You can see it in action over at our stand C120. But let me take you through how this aligns to the flywheel. Now the first step, again, let me start with Learn. Now what you're getting here at Learn is how do you personalize this learning experience down to a level that you just could not before. Now this is where it's important to understand, up until now, the atomic unit we use for learning is probably a lesson, a course, an article, right? A live class, that's as small as we can personalize it. And the reality is, even within that 1 hour session or that 2 hour course, there are still bits that are irrelevant to me or not to the level of my ability. What AI does now is it changes that atomic unit right down to the next word that you're going to see. And so this is a level of personalization that was just not possible before. If you took AI out of the picture, the best case scenario is you can personalize a course for a whole bunch of people in a room. But here we're going down to the smallest atomic unit possible. What it's also able to do is taking your context to a level that wasn't possible before. I can teach you about the same skill, but take into account that your job role is in sales and your job role is in product, and give you examples that are tailored to your world. So it's emotionally more meaningful, therefore more engaged. It's more likely to sink in and retain because it's tailored to my world and my context. It's able to do that to my level of skill. Now, what you're seeing here is something called a deep dive, where what Guru is able to do is generate a deep dive into a topic that's tailored to my ability and my understanding of that topic. It will automatically highlight topics and concepts that I might not be familiar with because it knows me. And that's to the level it can now personalize. But like I said, that's just the theory. How do I know this person knows, but how do I now get them to practice and actually apply this? Now again, what the AI agent is able to do is use your organization's knowledge and your organization's context to be able to essentially create and simulate real world context for you to apply that. Now, whether that is I'm a first time manager and I'm about to do my first one-to-one or have a difficult conversation, or I'm a salesperson who's about to jump on a call, whatever those skills are, you're now able to create scenarios and challenges where they can practice, apply, and get that feedback. Now, the important thing here is it's not just about you practicing, but it's the closest proxy we have to evaluating the application of skill. Right? If someone is saying they're great at negotiation, this is the closest we have to be able to get them to apply that negotiation and evaluate to what degree of proficiency do they have that skill. Now, one of the blockers is feedback. That's great, they're doing this, but quite often in an organization, you're waiting around for managers or experts to be able to get that feedback. So it's hard enough to get feedback in a timely manner, and then you're hoping for the best that that feedback is going to be useful and constructive for you to be able to improve. Now, what you're getting here is an AI agent based on your organizational knowledge and context is able to give you instant feedback, but not only that, prompt the right level of reflection in you for you to be able to reflect on how you could have done that better. Maybe I just had that difficult conversation with a direct report, and I either feed that into Guru to say, what could I have done better? And get instant feedback around that I can act on. Now, the other type of feedback, like I mentioned in the flywheel, is two-pronged. One is feedback for the learner, which is what I showed you, but then there's feedback back to the person who's designing the experience, who in this case is the AI agent. And this is where the AI agent is able to look at the application of that skill to see that, okay, this person is not good at this, they could be better at that. And that insight into their progress goes straight back into the learning experience design, which AI automates. Now, the great thing about AI here is it has memory. So every interaction you have with Guru, it's forming a picture of what you're good at, what your ambitions are, what you could get better at. And all of that goes into the next line or the next word it's going to generate, and consequently the next experience it's going to deliver to you. So if you imagine going back to that flywheel where when it was humans going through it, it would have taken us weeks, if not months, to gather that feedback data, go back to the drawing board and design for what does that learning experience need to be in order to move the needle and achieve the metric we need. But what you're seeing here is almost instantly the AI agent is able to use the feedback data, use it to inform the next experience it's going to now deliver back to that individual. And that experience could be completely multimodal. And that's what's incredible about this. We're not talking about, it's not creating a course. It could be anything from reinforcing the foundation with a knowledge check. It could be another practice scenario that's adapted to it. It could be getting you to reflect on certain things in terms of how you could have behaved differently. There's a whole range that doesn't require a human to create one type of learning and forcing that for this particular use case. Now, all of this is happening at scale, on demand, in a conversation, directly embedded within the flow of work. Now, whenever I show this, I get a pause. And quite frankly, the question I get is, what does L&D do now? Right? Because quite often, in so many organizations we've worked with, L&D has built its infrastructure around being a content factory that essentially is designing learning experiences or producing content and pushing that out. And now when you're seeing something that is live, creating hyper-personalized experiences based on feedback data is collected and going through that flywheel, it raises the question of what they're doing, because the data says it. Like our friends at Harvard Business have recently come out with some research. And Harvard Business, and you can find this article online, says out of a group who tested an AI agent for teaching coaching, they found 15% higher perceived skill improvement. What was interesting is they called out the fact that this felt more personalized for their job role context than anything else they've done. And 53% of them preferred this to classroom training. And that is a really important point, because quite often, even today, I hear classroom training is still used, and rightly so. It's a tool in our toolkit which should be used. And people thought they don't like the e-learning stuff, people still like going to classrooms, but to have over 50% of people call out saying, I'd prefer this experience to what I would get in a classroom, is quite an important thing for us to take away. Now at this point, this isn't an intervention. This is not where I tell you, we should all be thinking about a different career right now. This is not about AI coming for our jobs. What AI is coming for in most cases is not for jobs, it's coming for ineffective process. And if you're going to fight it and stick to an ineffective process, then that could cost you your job. But what we need to look at is, where is the ineffective process that this is calling out, and what do we need to do to be able to embrace this and shift in the direction we need to. So I don't want to leave you here going, here's the problem, go figure. But working with organizations, what I have is a list of transformations that we're seeing in organizations who are embracing and adapting to this change. And I just want to share that with you. So what does it mean for you? So first thing is this idea of architecting the ecosystem, not the event. Now just reflect on the fact that if someone asked you today, what capabilities are you trying to build in your organization? Do you think you can confidently answer that question? And if not, why not? Because that's what the business is interested in. And that's where our problem is. We need to be thinking about not the content. We need to be thinking about the context in which this exists. So what AI isn't going to do here is go and define our skills strategy and work with the organization to get the buy-in for prioritizing what are the capabilities that we need to build. Why do we need to build that? What are the OKRs and the objectives we're trying to achieve, and why does this matter? That's the job the human needs to do. Now, AI is great at hyper-personalizing, but what knowledge is this based on? What content is this based on? What sources is this based on? That decision around what the inputs are for it to generate that practice scenario, that's down to the humans. It's only as good as what its input is. And that decision around what goes into that ecosystem sits with you. It's the way I look at it is almost, you're the conductor of this orchestra. The music sheet is the strategy. It's your job to read the music sheet and conduct that orchestra. It's time to put down the instrument yourself. That's what we need here in terms of transformation. Now the next one is designing for loops, not launches. Now this is If in your organization now, the moment you've launched a new program or content, that's when learning stops, then we have a problem. What we need to be thinking about is, rather than big bang events of I've got this new program out, here's a new course that's coming out, what we're thinking about instead is in iterative cycles. Is it moving the needle? Are we getting closer to that metric that we need to move? If our metric is we want to improve customer satisfaction by 15%, then are you speaking to the people who can tell you whether you're moving in that direction or not? And are you using that data to be able to iterate? What we need to move away from is this big project plan of delivering a program. Instead, we need to start looking at how quickly can I get that first bit of feedback so I can get that data to improve on the experience I'm offering. Now, coach for application, not awareness. Now, if someone in your organization is learning something today, who is responsible for whether they apply it or not? Do you care? Are you checking? Do you put in as much time and effort to think about the application of that learning versus are they consuming that learning or not? Hand on heart. Quite often, I don't see as much thinking around the application as there is around the consumption of that learning. But what's the goal? What's the business giving you budget for? For consuming learning or the application? And this is where we get into an awareness trap, right? We think it's enough. People know they've passed an assessment or test, that's enough. That's not enough. Because they'll go to AI. That's the reality. They will go to AI. The question is, are they doing it out of design or accident? And it can happen out of design only if you're involved in that process. And this is where the opportunity is for you to create those moments of touch point. Now, the biggest lever we have here in L&D is we need to empower our managers. Whether we're able to coach for application and go beyond awareness is whether we can get manager buy-in to create the conditions for someone to be able to apply and get the feedback for the things they're learning. Unless we can leverage that lever, we won't be able to get beyond the awareness stage. And that will be a problem. What will start to happen is if we're not able to enable managers, managers will start taking ownership themselves. And then there will be a question of, do we need L&D because the managers are owning the development of people in their teams? Next transformation is measure the movement. Now think about this for a moment. If you stopped tracking completion rate, could you still prove learning was working in your organization? Put your hand up if you think you could. I'm getting a bit of so-so, couple of hands up. Now that is something we should be concerned about, right? Because it doesn't matter once they're going to an AI tool. No one's tracking completion, right? And so that metric now is redundant. And if that's the only metric you're using to prove whether you're having impact on the organization or not, then we've got an issue. What we need to be looking at is not an event-based metric. Did this happen? What we need to be looking at is the progress, right? Where right now this person's at a proficiency level of 3. Have we moved this person to a 4 or a 5? Is there progress? We need to then combine that with qualitative data. Sit down, talk to people, right? You've got really good at, your win rate has got really good in sales. What happened? They'll tell you, I started doing this differently. Ask them, why did you start doing that differently? Well, I was using Guru and it said I was doing my negotiation really badly and suggested a different technique. That's your narrative, to connect the dots and be able to talk about the impact you're having, not the completion rate. Now, how often do you feel like in your organization, you're going to someone and saying, I need you to stop working and I need you to come and do this training? And often that's where there's friction, right? There's friction where people are like, no, I'm too busy. You can't take me away from work. But what we're talking about now goes beyond this idea of learning in the flow of work. Even learning in the flow of work isn't enough. What we're talking about now, what's happening now, is there is a merging that's happening between learning and work. Think about your own day-to-day. You're working on something now, and you've got a question, you need to know how to do something, you need to know how to play something in a call that you're about to have. chances are you are probably going to an AI tool right now and going, this is the context, what should I do? Then why do you think anyone else in your organization is going to go to that 2-hour course that you designed? That is the merging of learning and work, way beyond learning in the flow of work. This is not about accessing a course in that moment. So what do we need to do? We need to now think about the moments that matter. This is a concept I talk about in the book, where moments that matter are the moments where if you can connect someone with the most relevant insight, knowledge, or learning experience, in that moment, you can shape their performance. Like the examples I gave, I'm about to have my first one-to-one as a new manager. If you get me at that point, and you're able to guide me on the best practices around it, I can practice it and get instant feedback. That's a moment that matters, where you've shaped my performance. Now this is where there's often a disconnect between what we're doing in learning and aligning that back to what the business is trying to do. Now every business has a mission. It has a strategy around how it's going to achieve that mission. Then it's got a bunch of OKRs and objectives to see whether it's on track to achieving that mission or not. Now, how often, just think about the learning experiences or opportunities you've offered. Do you think you've got a clear idea of how you can connect the dots to that, those OKRs and objectives? It's quite often what we see is it's done after fact. It's retrofitted. We've done the learning program. It's out in the wild. And now 6 months later, someone's asking us, well, what's the ROI on that? And now we're trying to get scrappy, look at the data to go, can we work backwards to see whether it's helped change anything? But actually, this is where we need to flip it. Right? We need to be confident that if a CFO is coming up to us to ask for the ROI, we can answer that question in business language. We're doing it up front. Up front, we're asking the question, what are the key OKRs or objectives that the business cares about? All right, it's improving customer retention, great. Okay, what are the roles that are going to influence that objective? This role and this role. Okay, what are the skills that that role needs? And do they have it to the level they need to have it? No, they don't. Okay, here's where the gaps are. Great. Now how do we architect our ecosystem to be able to drive that? Now look, that's the transformation that we think is required in order for us to be able to adapt. Now, the reality is this: if we don't define what L&D is going to be in this era, AI will define it for us. And so we need to take control of this. And I don't think there's a lot of discussions I've come across around, do we still need L&D or not? There's no two ways about it. I'm 100% certain you definitely need L&D. But L&D that is purely around creating and pushing out content, unfortunately, we don't need that. And so this is really a choice around, it's in your control, right? The steering wheel is in your hands. And whether you choose to embrace and adapt and adopt it or not, really comes down to you. Now, if you'd like to see Guru and hear about some of the stories of how organizations are embracing this, we're right by the networking lounge in the middle of the hall. Come by, play with it yourself, and see it in action. But thank you for your time.